It started on one of those warm, quiet Sundays that makes you forget life has sharp edges. I'd just gotten back from a 5-mile jog through the neighborhood trails, earbuds still dangling around my neck, sweat soaking the collar of my t-shirt. The late afternoon sun filtered in through the kitchen window, bouncing off the hardwood floors we installed together last summer. The air smelled faintly like rosemary and something sweet, Katie's baking, probably. She was already home. I hadn't even heard the car pull in. Her purse sat on the couch like it had landed there with a little too much carelessness. She stood in the kitchen, barefoot, humming something familiar while she prepped the French press. She looked good. Really good. Hair pinned up like she'd done it just for herself, makeup still fresh like she'd only just come in. There was a subtle lift in her mood, her eyes sparkled like they used to in the early years, back when Sunday afternoons were for board games and wine, not laundry and awkward silences. "Hey, babe," she called out over her shoulder when she heard me drop my keys on the hallway table. "How was the run?" I shrugged, grabbing a towel from the drawer to wipe my neck. "Hot. Way too humid. You just get in." She nodded, turning with 2 mugs in her hands. "Yeah. Lunch with the girls. You know, work gossip, overpriced salads, pretending to care about Carol's cat." She laughed softly, sipping from one of the mugs. Everything about her felt light, relaxed, more than usual. I didn't know what it meant yet, but something tugged at me, something quiet but firm, like a thread pulling in the wrong direction. I dropped down onto the couch and noticed a piece of paper sitting on the edge of the dining table. A folded square, slightly creased like it had been handled too many times. At first, I ignored it. Probably a grocery list or some scribbled reminder. But then I saw the handwriting, loopy and unfamiliar, and something made me get up and walk over. I unfolded it. "You smelled like me all day. Don't wash the shirt." "R." I stared at it for a solid 5 seconds before the words actually registered. Then my eyes flicked to the chair nearby where one of my old dress shirts, a navy one, soft from too many washes, was draped over the back. I hadn't worn it in weeks. A month at least. Katie had never liked it much, said the collar looked too stiff. My first thought was maybe it wasn't my shirt. Maybe I was mistaken. But it was. I remembered the faint bleach stain on the left cuff. It was mine. "Hey, Katie." I called out, holding the note in my hand like it might burn me. She turned, still holding her mug. "Yeah?" I walked into the kitchen and held it up. "What's this?" Her smile didn't falter. If anything, it curved a little more. "Oh my God," she said with a soft laugh. "That? It's from Renee. From work." She was messing around. "We have this stupid joke, we were talking about perfumes and scent memory and..." "God, it's dumb. She was teasing me for borrowing your shirt that day. Office humor. Nothing important." I didn't say anything for a beat. Just looked at her. She met my eyes, completely calm, like nothing about that note was strange. And maybe it shouldn't have been. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But something in her voice, it was too ready. Too packaged. Like a line rehearsed in a mirror. "You borrowed my shirt?" I asked. "Yeah," she said quickly, sipping her coffee. "You remember, right? I spilled tea on myself before a meeting last week. Yours was hanging in the laundry room. I figured I'd wear it with that blazer. It looked kind of cute, actually." I didn't remember that. Not at all. And Katie rarely, if ever, wore my clothes. She had her own style, and borrowing anything of mine was usually followed by some sarcastic comment about how menswear chic was not her thing. But I didn't push it. I nodded, slid the note into my back pocket, and said nothing more. That should have been the end of it. A dumb note, a joke from a coworker, an explanation that mostly made sense. But as I walked back to the living room, the moment looped in my head. Her face when she saw the paper. The pause, so brief it was almost invisible, before she answered. The way she stood a little too straight, smiled a little too wide. I sat down and stared at my running shoes, heart starting to drum louder than I wanted to admit. And that's when the first crack formed. Tiny. Barely there. But unmistakable. Because here's the thing, I knew Katie. We'd been married for 8 years. I knew her tells. I knew her awkward laugh and her sarcastic eye rolls and the exact shape her mouth made when she was trying to lie but didn't want to hurt someone. And right then, in that kitchen, holding that note, she was lying. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't ask who R was or why the note was sitting out in the open like it wasn't a grenade with the pin halfway out. Instead, I kept everything normal. I helped with dinner, laughed at her stories from work, and even kissed her goodnight. But something in me shifted. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was doubt. A quiet whisper that started at the base of my skull and grew louder every time she smiled like nothing was wrong. The next morning, I found myself checking her purse after she left for work. I hated myself for doing it. That wasn't who I was. But I did it anyway. There was nothing inside. No second phone. No perfume bottle I didn't recognize. Just receipts, lip balm, and an unopened granola bar. Later that week, I found the shirt in the laundry hamper. It still had a faint scent clinging to it. Something warm and unfamiliar. Not mine. Not hers either. I didn't say anything about that either. Instead, I folded it, placed it back in the drawer, and pretended like I didn't feel like a stranger in my own house. Because that's how these things start, right? Not with shouting or broken dishes, but with little things. A forgotten shirt, a note signed by someone else, a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Once the doubt sets in, it doesn't go away quietly. It finds a corner in your mind and plants itself there, growing roots in the smallest, most ordinary things. A glance, a pause, a tone of voice that used to mean nothing, now sounding like a warning bell. That week, I started replaying moments I'd long since filed away. Not because I wanted to, trust me, I didn't, but they kept coming back anyway, bubbling to the surface like memories with new subtitles. There was the night about 2 months ago when Katie came home late, way later than usual. I texted her around 7, and she said she was just grabbing drinks with coworkers. No big deal. We both had careers, friends, lives outside of each other. I respected that. But when she finally walked through the door a little after 11, something was off. She flinched when I went in for a hug, pulling away like I'd startled her. Then she gave me this tired smile and said, "I need a shower," before heading straight upstairs. I remember standing at the bottom of the stairs, still holding the book I'd been reading, staring up at her retreating figure. At the time, I chalked it up to stress. Maybe she'd had one drink too many. Maybe she was on edge about something at work. I didn't push. That's the thing, I used to pride myself on not being the controlling type. I believed in giving space. But now, that night replayed in my head like a slow-motion scene with a new narrator. Her body language, the urgency to get clean, the way she avoided eye contact, it wasn't just stress. It was shame. Then there was the phone thing. We used to have this casual arrangement, location sharing through our phones. Not because we didn't trust each other, but because it was convenient. If one of us got held up or wanted to grab something on the way home, we could check and see where the other was. No big deal. One morning, I noticed it was off. Her location was suddenly unavailable. I asked her about it casually over breakfast, and she acted surprised. Said it must have been a phone update or some glitch. "Oh, I didn't even notice," she said, spooning yogurt into her mouth like she wasn't lying through her teeth. "I'll check the settings later." She never turned it back on. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But these little things, they stack up. And the more I looked, the more cracks I started seeing. Like the sudden obsession with self-help books and life resets. Katie had always rolled her eyes at that kind of stuff. Once, she joked about how everyone's answer to a midlife crisis was either yoga or hiking. "What happened to just talking it out like adults?" she'd said. But a few weeks ago, she started attending these weekend retreats. Creative energy resets, she called them. Spiritual hiking, mindfulness in nature, digital detoxing. At first, I was supportive. Thought maybe she just needed a break from the grind. But then it became a pattern, one weekend a month, sometimes more. Always in the same part of the state. Always coming back refreshed, glowing. I remember saying something offhand about maybe joining her one day. She got quiet. Then she laughed. "It's kind of a solo thing," she said, sipping her tea. "Helps me clear my head without distractions." Distractions. Apparently, I was now a distraction. Then there was the land. We own a small piece of country property about 90 minutes outside of town. Nothing special, just a cabin and a couple of acres. A place we'd planned to build out slowly over time. Maybe retire there. It had always been ours. She used to call it our getaway, our future. But a few months ago, she started pushing to transfer it into her name. "For tax reasons," she said. "It'll simplify the paperwork and avoid capital gains weirdness down the line." I nodded like an idiot. I trusted her. Of course I did. We weren't hiding money from each other, and Katie had always handled our taxes. She was the organized one. The planner. I signed the documents. Now, I couldn't stop wondering why the sudden need to claim that land as hers. What was she planning for? Or worse, who was she planning it with? I started keeping track of these things in my notes app. Not because I needed a list, but because writing them down made them feel less like paranoia and more like evidence. Something tangible. My stomach stayed in a permanent knot. I'd lie in bed next to her, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, wondering where she'd really been that night. Who she was texting with her phone tilted just out of my line of sight. What kind of future she was building in secret. We'd stopped being affectionate. Not abruptly, but gradually, like a room going dimmer over time. A touch on the arm here. A quick peck on the cheek there. Lately, even that had faded. She said she was tired. Or stressed. Or had a headache. And maybe all of that was true. Or maybe she just didn't want to pretend anymore. Some nights I'd look at her and wonder if she was already gone, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, just waiting for the right moment to make it official. Or maybe she was waiting until she was sure the next chapter of her life was ready. Like I was the layover before the real destination. The cruelest part was how normal everything looked from the outside. We still had dinners. Still made plans. Still had photos on the fridge of our last vacation. But every smile felt more posed. Every laugh a little too practiced. I started to question everything. Had she ever told me the full truth about her past relationships? About her friendships with coworkers? About why she always took work calls outside? Once, she told me a story about a friend of hers, someone who found out her husband was cheating only because he changed his cologne. Katie laughed about it, saying how dumb men are at covering their tracks. That story had been years ago, but now it echoed in my mind like a warning I'd ignored. I wasn't dumb. At least, I didn't think I was. But I'd definitely been blind. And the worst part? I still didn't have proof. Not real, undeniable, in-your-face proof. Just shadows. Implications. A note signed by someone named R and 1,000 little gut punches that told me something was deeply wrong. But proof or not, I knew what I felt. And I knew I couldn't keep walking around pretending everything was okay. Something had shifted. Something real. And I wasn't going to be the last person to admit it. The Friday it all snapped was deceptively quiet. One of those golden autumn evenings where the air smelled like burning leaves and possibility. Katie was in our bedroom zipping up a bag, humming to herself like she was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. She looked stunning. Black heels I didn't recognize. That wine-colored dress she usually saved for galas or high-end fundraisers. Her makeup was bolder than usual, red lips, smoky eyes, hair pinned in a way that looked like it took effort but was meant to seem effortless. She didn't dress like that for her girlfriends. Not even her closest ones. "Where are you guys going again?" I asked, leaning against the bedroom door frame. She turned around, smiling brightly, too brightly. "Upstate. A girls' weekend. Mandy's birthday thing. Wine, cheese, massages, the whole cliché package." "Didn't know Mandy was that kind of birthday person," I said, half joking. "She is now, apparently," Katie replied as she clipped on earrings. "You know how everyone's into wellness weekends these days." I nodded, saying nothing. Just watched as she grabbed her phone, her bag, and headed toward the front door. She kissed me quickly on the cheek, keys already in her hand. "Don't wait up. Love you." The words hit like darts thrown casually at a board I hadn't agreed to stand in front of. I waited 5 minutes before grabbing my own keys. I didn't have a real plan. Just instinct. Something gnawed at my insides, pulling me toward answers I wasn't sure I wanted. I drove the side streets, keeping a good distance from her car. I'd never followed anyone before. It felt ridiculous. Amateurish. But I did it anyway. She didn't head toward the highway. Not toward the wine country lodges or spa towns she'd name-dropped. Instead, she turned off onto the expressway, veering downtown into the heart of Old Springs, our city's historic district. Shops, galleries, high-end dining spots. Not the scene for a girls' retreat. I parked half a block away from the restaurant where she eventually stopped. It was a sleek, upscale place with enormous glass windows and little round tables set with white linen and flickering candles. From the shadow of an alley across the street, I could see her walk in. And then I saw him. He stood to greet her, tall and confident in that smug way some guys carry themselves, like they've never doubted anything a day in their life. He took her coat and leaned in for a kiss on the cheek, too close to the lips, too slow. She didn't pull away. She smiled. They sat at a corner table, half-shielded by a planter, but still visible if you knew where to look. I knew where to look. They talked. Laughed. She leaned in. He touched her hand. It wasn't performative. It was an asterisk, mate. Familiar. Like this wasn't the first time. Like they had a rhythm. Like I was the outsider. At one point, he reached across the table, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Her face lit up. Not the polite smile she used at parties. This was different. It was soft. Real. I took out my phone and snapped 3 quick photos. It felt dirty. Like I was invading something. But that didn't make sense. It was my marriage I was watching burn. They stood to leave and he placed his hand on the small of her back, firm and familiar. She let him guide her out like they were a couple that did this every weekend. No hesitation. No looking over her shoulder. I followed from a distance, ducking behind parked cars, moving slowly. They crossed the street, laughing like teenagers. She reached into her bag, pulled out a keycard. Boutique hotel half a block from the restaurant. Cozy. Discreet. The kind of place with dim lights and polite staff trained not to ask questions. They disappeared inside. I didn't follow them past the lobby doors. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the warm, flickering light of the hotel entrance. For a moment, I thought I might go in. Ask for a room number. Make a scene. But I didn't. I didn't need a confrontation. I already had the truth. And it hit with a strange kind of numbness. Not fire. Not ice. Just stillness. My world had tilted, but my feet stayed planted. She had chosen this. Deliberately. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It was an active, continuous choice. When I got home, the silence was louder than any fight we'd ever had. I dropped my phone on the counter, the photos still open on the screen, and poured myself a drink. Something cheap, something that burned. I didn't sleep much that night. Just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closet door that still held her clothes. Every now and then, I'd glance at the photos again, like they might change. Like maybe, just maybe, I had misread the whole thing. But they didn't change. Neither did the knot in my chest. She came home just before sunrise. I heard the garage door groan open, then the soft click of the door to the mudroom. She moved quietly, like she didn't want to wake me. I stayed perfectly still in bed, listening. Drawers opening. Shoes coming off. The faint creak of the bathroom cabinet. Water running. The smell of makeup remover. Then finally, the bed dipped slightly beside me. She slipped under the covers, curling to face away from me, breathing slowly, evenly. Like she could just fall asleep with a clean conscience. Like the night had meant nothing. I stared at the ceiling until the sun rose, casting pale yellow stripes across the room. Every inch of me was tense. Alert. But I didn't move. Didn't say a word. Not yet. Not until I had everything I needed. Katie woke up a few hours later, stretching like she'd actually slept soundly. I pretended to be half asleep, watching her out of the corner of my eye as she slipped out of bed and tiptoed into the bathroom. She didn't say good morning. She didn't try to kiss me or ask how I slept. She just moved through the room like a guest, quiet, practiced, polite. By the time I came downstairs, she was in the kitchen, humming again, this time to some indie playlist echoing softly from her phone. French press bubbling, scrambled eggs in the pan, toast already cooling on a plate. She turned to me with a bright smile. "Morning, babe," she said, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just spent the night in a hotel with another man. I nodded slowly, easing into the chair at the kitchen island. I didn't trust myself to speak yet. My chest felt tight. My skin too hot for no reason. I was afraid if I opened my mouth, everything inside would come pouring out all at once. She started talking about fall plans, about a new project at work, about how we should visit her parents before Thanksgiving. She floated through the conversation like we were still the couple from last year, before the notes, the hiding, the glances that didn't mean what they used to mean. "Pilates at 10, she said, rinsing out her coffee mug. "I might swing by the co-op after. Want me to grab anything?" I shook my head. "Okay," she said lightly, grabbing her keys and slipping on her jacket. "Love you." She said it out of habit. She didn't look at me when she said it. When the door closed behind her, I didn't move for a long time. Just stared at the last swirl of steam rising from her coffee mug. Eventually, I got up and walked over to the dining table where her laptop sat open. She'd been working on something the night before she left. It was still plugged in. The screen had gone to sleep, but I tapped the spacebar and it lit back up. No password. I sat down, fingers hovering over the trackpad. Part of me hated myself for what I was doing. Another part, the part that had stood outside a boutique hotel the night before, had already stopped caring. Her desktop was cluttered. Mostly work documents, half-finished presentations, PDFs with generic file names. I clicked through folders, trying not to look suspicious even though I was alone. Then I found one labeled Backups. It was connected to her cloud storage. Photos. Videos. Notes. Audio recordings. At first, it was innocent. Pictures from a camping trip with her coworkers. Voice memos about reminders and deadlines. A few folders named after past clients. Then I saw one named Future Plans. My pulse quickened. Inside were spreadsheets. One was titled Plan for 2025. I opened it. It was like watching a movie where the ending was already spoiled. A budget. Housing options. Interior design mood boards. Travel plans. Even a tab for finances with my name listed under a column titled Initial Contributions. She had listed my bank accounts, our joint accounts, as funding sources for an entirely separate life. My breath caught in my throat. I kept digging. Another folder, saved audio. I clicked into it. Voice memos. Dozens of them. Some with her voice, soft and distant, talking about staying strong and letting go of what no longer serves her. Others were from him. His voice was deeper with that slow, smug confidence I recognized from the restaurant window. In one, he said, "I'm proud of you. One more step and we're free." In another, "I can't wait to wake up next to you without hiding." I paused. My stomach twisted. I played that one again. Katie's voice followed it, barely above a whisper, "Soon. I promise. I just need him to sign off on the land. Once it's in my name, we're clear." I stood up from the chair so fast it scraped across the floor. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She was maneuvering me financially. She was using me, taking pieces of the life we built and laying them out for someone else to live in. I felt cold all over. I went back to the laptop and copied everything, every document, every message, every recording onto a flash drive. I uploaded some to my own cloud too, just in case. This wasn't about jealousy anymore. This was about fraud. It was theft. It was premeditated, calculated betrayal. She didn't love him. She didn't even love me. She loved the plan, the life she could build using the foundation I had poured myself into. I wasn't even angry at that point. I was numb. Like someone had scooped me out from the inside. When I finished, I shut the laptop, stood in the middle of the room, and stared at the morning light crawling up the walls. For the first time in weeks, things were clear. Not better. Just clear. She came home a few hours later, groceries in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like nothing had happened. She smiled when she saw me on the couch. "Hey, you okay? You've been quiet today." I nodded. "Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" I smiled back. "The future." It was fitting that our anniversary fell on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are ordinary. Quiet. They sneak past you unless you're paying attention. Just like the way love fades. Just like the way betrayal builds. We never celebrated big, maybe takeout, sometimes a new bottle of wine if we felt fancy. But this time I decided to do something more traditional. I made dinner. Real dinner. Fettuccine with her favorite garlic cream sauce, soft jazz on the speaker, the good candles lit, cloth napkins even. I wanted everything to feel nostalgic. Familiar. Like something worth remembering. Like the past meant something even if the present was a lie. Katie walked in just after 7. She paused when she saw the table, 2 place settings, wine already breathing, soft music curling through the air. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You did all this?" I smiled, wiping my hands on a towel. "Anniversary, remember?" Her eyes flickered. A pause, half a second too long. "Of course," she said quickly. I didn't think we were doing anything big this year." "Nothing big," I replied, stepping around the kitchen island. "Just dinner. Like old times?" She hesitated at the threshold like she was trying to read the room. Then she walked in and set her purse down slowly. "You okay?" she asked. "You seem—" "I don't know. Off. Just tired," I said. "But happy you're here." She gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and sat down. We talked. About nothing, mostly. The way couples who are used to skimming the surface do. Her work. My work. The weather. A new store opening near her office. She mentioned Mandy again. Brought up some podcasts she wanted to try. She didn't mention the weekend. Didn't mention the man. Didn't bring up the hotel or the plans for 2025. I nodded in all the right places. Refilled her glass when it dipped below half. She relaxed eventually, shoulders softening, legs tucking under her chair. She started to hum along with the music. When she stood up to refill her wine, I walked into the living room and opened the laptop I'd left waiting on the coffee table. The screen came to life, casting a pale blue glow in the darkened room. One folder sat open, labeled plainly, Katie Double Life. Inside, screensh *TS, photos, saved voice messages, spreadsheets. The plan for 2 file. Audio clips from him. Her whispers back. The text logs from the cloud sync I'd recovered earlier that afternoon. GPS pings. Hotel receipts. I hit the spacebar to wake the slideshow I'd built. When she walked back into the room, wine glass in hand, the flicker of the screen caught her attention. She froze. For a moment, all I could hear was the clink of glass as she set it down on the edge of the table, her hand trembling slightly. Her eyes locked on the screen. A photo of her standing in front of the boutique hotel, head tilted up toward him, eyes closed. His hand was on her back. The timestamp in the bottom corner matched the Friday night she'd said she was out of town. The next image slid into place. An invoice for a weekend couples package booked under his name, with a second guest added at check-in. Next, the audio. Her voice saying, "I'm so close, just need to get him to sign over the land," followed by his soft laugh. Then, "He has no idea." Katie didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't lunge for the laptop or beg or yell or make a scene. She just stood there, silent, as the slideshow rolled on like a quiet eulogy for everything we'd built. Or rather, everything I thought we'd built. I sat back down slowly, watching her face for any flicker of regret, of guilt, of anything, really. "Do you want to explain?" I asked. "Nothing." She looked at me like I was someone she once knew from a dream she couldn't remember clearly. Like I was no longer a threat, no longer necessary. Just there. "You know everything," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "I do." From under the folder on the table, I pulled out the printed divorce papers. I'd already signed my side. I'd had the lawyer courier them over that morning. I slid them across the table toward her. Her eyes fell on them. She didn't flinch, didn't even pretend to be surprised. "Do I need a lawyer?" she asked softly. "You'll want one," I said. She didn't touch the papers. She didn't ask questions. She just stood there, hands still, eyes dull. "I never wanted it to get this far," she murmured. "You got further than you think," I said. A silence stretched between us. Long, heavy, almost sacred. Then she turned, picked up her glass, and walked out of the room. I sat there for another 10 minutes, staring at the flickering slideshow until the screen finally dimmed. Later that night, the divorce papers were gone from the table. I didn't ask where she took them. I didn't care. She didn't come to bed. I didn't expect her to. I slept on the couch, but sleep didn't come easy. It never does when you're waiting for a chapter to close on its own. I woke up to silence. The kind that doesn't just fill a house, but stretches into your bones. The guest room door was open. Her bags were gone. Her side of the closet was empty. I checked the bathroom. Only my toothbrush remained in the cup by the mirror. The robe she always wore was missing from the hook. The keys to her car, the spare set to the cabin, all gone. On the windowsill sat a single note, scrawled in her handwriting. "You knew everything. I'm sorry. Kay." That was it. No confrontation. No fight. No final argument about who was right or wrong. Just absence. I didn't crumble. I didn't scream. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the note, trying to remember if this was the same pen she'd used to write me love letters back when we still believed in each other. Probably was. And it probably didn't matter anymore. I spent that day closing everything down. I called the bank and had our joint accounts frozen. Canceled the cards. Changed the passwords on anything she might have had access to. I sent the final file to my lawyer and asked him to proceed with full separation of assets. The cabin land? We'd fight that in court if we had to. The only thing I didn't do was respond to the email I received later that week. From him. It was short. "I didn't know. She told me you were already divorced. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. If I had known, I would have never." I didn't finish reading. I deleted it. He didn't deserve my reply. He didn't deserve my anger either. Let him live with the fallout. Let her explain herself to someone new. They could keep their plans for 2025. The house felt too big after she left. Every drawer held a ghost. The coffee mug with her lipstick stains still sat on the counter for days before I finally threw it out. I didn't miss her. Not exactly. What I missed was the version of her I thought I knew. The version of us I'd believed in. But the person who'd written that note, the one who vanished without a backward glance, wasn't someone I could mourn. She was a stranger who looked like someone I used to love. Eventually, I listed the house for sale. I couldn't stay there anymore. Too many shadows in the corners. Too many echoes of conversations we never had.